American Sniper, by Chris Kyle. Introduction. There's a moment in every young person's life when you look out at the world and wonder, what's my place in all of this? What am I meant to do? For most of us, that question leads to college, or a job, or learning a trade. But for a young man from Texas, a cowboy at heart, that question led him to become the most lethal sniper in American history. The story I'm about to share with you isn't just about war. It's about a man named Chris Kyle, and his book, American Sniper, has sold millions of copies and was turned into a major motion picture for a reason. It pulls back the curtain on a world most of us will never see, the world of the Navy SEALs, a world of unimaginable pressure, sacrifice, and a brotherhood forged in fire. But this isn't just a story of battles fought in faraway lands. It's the story of a man who grew up riding broncs and hunting with his father, who loved his country with a fierce, uncomplicated passion. It's the story of a husband who met the love of his life in a bar and a father who struggled to reconcile the man he was at war with the man his family needed him to be at home. Chris Kyle's life was a study in contrasts. He was a man who could lie perfectly still for days to take a single shot, but who had the playful heart of a prankster. He was revered as a hero, the legend, by his brothers in arms, yet he was haunted by the ones he couldn't save. He was a warrior who dealt in death, but who fought so that others might live in peace. So, what can we learn from a life lived at such extremes? By the end of our time together, you'll understand the mindset that allows someone to perform under impossible pressure. You'll see the hidden costs of duty, the ones that don't show up in the headlines. And most importantly, you'll discover the profound, and often painful journey of finding your purpose, losing it, and fighting to find it all over again. This is the story of the American Sniper. But it's also a story about what it means to be a man, a patriot, a husband, and a father in a world that rarely makes things simple. Book summary. It begins, as so many powerful stories do, in the quiet, dusty landscapes of Texas. Before Chris Kyle was a SEAL, he was a cowboy. From the time he could walk, he was on a horse, learning the language of the land. His world was shaped by simple, powerful values: God, country, and family. His father taught him two things that would define his life: how to shoot, and the importance of being a protector, a sheepdog who watches over the flock. He wasn't a troublemaker, but he had a strong sense of justice that was black and white. If he saw someone getting picked on, especially someone smaller, he felt it was his duty to step in. It was a role he took on naturally, this idea of being a shield for others. His youth was filled with the things that make a Texas boy what he is: hunting with his family, working on the ranch, and the thrilling, dangerous dance of the rodeo. For a while, that was his world, bustin' broncs, feeling the raw energy of an untamed animal beneath him. It taught him patience, a skill that would later serve him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. But a nasty accident, a horse flipping over on him in a chute, left him with pins in his wrist and an abrupt end to his rodeo career. With one door closed, another began to open. The idea of military service had always been there. He wanted action, a real challenge. He first walked into a Marine recruiter's office, but they were out to lunch. An Army recruiter tried to woo him, but it was the Navy recruiter down the hall who sealed his fate with two words: Navy SEALs. He told Chris about BUD/S, basic underwater demolition/SEAL training, a crucible so intense that over 90% of the men who attempt it fail. It was designed to break you, to find your absolute limit and then push you past it. For Chris, this wasn't a deterrent, it was a challenge. It was exactly what he was looking for. But the Navy initially told him no. The pins in his arm from his rodeo injury disqualified him. It seemed his military dream was over before it began. He went back to being a cowboy, working as a ranch hand, living a hard but simple life under the open sky. Then, One day in 1999, the phone rang. It was the Navy. "Are you still interested in being a SEAL?" they asked. The rules had changed, and they wanted him. This time, there was no looking back. Boot camp was a disappointment. He felt it was designed to prepare you to sit on a ship, not to become an elite warrior. He actually got out of shape. But what followed was the true test, BUD/S. It's a name that carries a weight of its own. It stands for Basic Underwater Demolition/SEAL, but what it really is a half-year-long process of being systematically broken down and rebuilt. The very first day, the instructors worked them over with fire hoses while they did endless push-ups on the asphalt. The physical pain was immense, but as Chris quickly learned, the real battle wasn't with his muscles. It was in his mind. He says that getting through BUD/S is more about mental toughness than anything else. It's about being stubborn, about refusing to give in when every part of your body is screaming at you to quit. There's a brass bell on the training grounds. Ring that bell, and your ordeal is over. You get a warm donut and a cup of coffee, and you're sent on your way, your dream of becoming a SEAL ending right there. That bell is a constant temptation. The most notorious part of BUD/S is Hell Week. It's 5.5 days of continuous, brutal training with almost no sleep. You're cold, you're wet, you're exhausted, and you're in constant motion. Chris went into Hell Week with a fractured foot from a training accident just days before, an injury he hid from the instructors because he refused to be rolled back and have to start over. He describes lying on the beach, in the freezing surf, with his arms locked with the guys next to him, his body shaking so violently from the cold that they called it jackhammering. It was in those moments, he says, that he prayed for someone to pee on him, just for a fleeting moment of warmth. It's a raw, visceral detail that tells you everything you need to know about the extremes these men endure. He learned to survive by breaking it down, meal to meal. They were fed every 6 hours, like clockwork. So no matter how bad it got, salvation was never more than a few hours away. It was that simple mental trick that kept him from ringing the bell. He was too stubborn to quit, or, as he jokes, maybe just too lazy to get up. Out of a class of over 200 men, only a couple of dozen would make it through. Chris was one of them. He had proven he had the mental fortitude. He had earned his place. But just as he was starting his advanced training, he met someone who would change his life in a way that had nothing to do with combat. Her name was Taya. He saw her at a bar in San Diego, and for him, it was love at first sight. Taya, for her part, was not impressed. She had just gotten out of a bad experience with someone who had wanted to be a SEAL, and she told Chris exactly what she thought of his kind: "You're arrogant, self-centered, and glory-seeking." Instead of getting defensive, Chris responded with a simple, idealistic sincerity that caught her off guard. "I would lay down my life for my country," he told her. How is that self-centered? That was the beginning of their love story, a story that would be tested by distance, by war, and by the immense pressures of the life he had chosen. Chris was all in, pursuing her with the same focus he would later apply on the battlefield. It was a romance that played out over phone calls from training bases across the country. He had just joined his unit, SEAL Team 3, and was beginning the intense workup for deployment when the world changed forever. On the morning of September 11, 2001, he woke up to Taya yelling for him to come see the television. He watched, stunned, as the second plane hit the World Trade Center. His phone buzzed with messages: "Kyle, get your ass back to base. Now." The war had found him. His first deployment took him not to Afghanistan, but to the Persian Gulf in the lead-up to the invasion of Iraq in 2003. As a new guy in the platoon, his job was often to be the 60-gunner, manning the M60 machine gun. His first real taste of action wasn't on land, but at sea, conducting VBSS missions, visit, board, search, and seizure. He and his team would ride in small, fast boats, pulling up alongside massive oil tankers that were smuggling oil for Saddam Hussein in violation of UN sanctions. They would throw a grappling hook, scale a ladder up the side of the moving ship, and take control of the vessel. It quickly became routine. The real war began for him on March 20, 2003, during the initial invasion of Iraq. His platoon was tasked with securing the Al Fo oil terminal to prevent Saddam from setting the oil fields ablaze as he had in the First Gulf War. They flew in at night, their helicopter peppered with anti-aircraft fire. Their cool-looking desert patrol vehicles, essentially weaponized dune buggies, were supposed to race off the ramp and secure the area. Instead, they promptly got stuck in the oil-soaked mud. Military intelligence, as he dryly notes, can be an oxymoron. Stuck on the ground and heavily outnumbered, they found themselves in an intense firefight. But they had a powerful advantage: air support. Chris describes watching A-10 Warthogs and AC-130 gunships chew up the enemy forces. "Fuck," he thought to himself, "this is great. I fucking love this." It was nerve-wracking and exhilarating, and in that chaos, he felt he was exactly where he was supposed to be. But it was a few days later, near the town of Nasiriyah, that he would face the moment that every sniper confronts, but few ever speak of. His platoon was providing overwatch for a column of Marines advancing through a small town. He was on a rooftop, looking through the scope of a .300 Win Mag rifle. He saw a woman and a child step out of a house about 50 yards away. The street was otherwise deserted. As the Marines approached, the woman pulled something from beneath her clothes. It was yellow. His platoon chief, watching beside him, identified it instantly. "She's got a grenade," he said. "That's a Chinese grenade." Then came the order that would change his life forever. "Take a shot." Chris hesitated. It was a woman. A child was nearby. "Shoot!" the chief yelled. "Get the grenade." "The Marines?" He squeezed the trigger. The bullet leapt out. The grenade dropped. He fired again as it exploded. It was the first person he had ever killed with a sniper rifle. And it was the only time in his entire career he killed someone other than a male combatant. He reflects on this moment with a chilling clarity. "It was my duty to shoot, and I don't regret it," he writes. He believes the woman was already dead in her soul, blinded by an evil that made her willing to sacrifice her own child and anyone else nearby just to kill Americans. His shots, he says, saved several American lives, which were clearly worth more than that woman's twisted soul. This event solidified his worldview. The enemy, in his mind, was not just an opposing force, they were savages, a word he uses throughout the book to describe the despicable evil he felt they were fighting. This black-and-white perspective became his armor, the mental framework that allowed him to do his job with lethal efficiency and a clear conscience. After that first tour, he came home, but he knew he wasn't done. He had found his calling, and he volunteered for sniper school. This, he says, was the hardest school he ever went through, next to Bud/S. It wasn't just about shooting. In fact, shooting was only a small part of it. The real foundation of being a SEAL sniper is observation and stalking, the art of moving into position completely unseen. It requires an almost superhuman patience, something he admits he didn't naturally possess. He had to learn it, to move with painstaking slowness, to blend so perfectly with his surroundings that he became just another bush or a shadow. He learned the science of the shot, how the rotation of the earth, the wind, and a dozen other factors affect a bullet's path. He learned his weapons inside and out, from the versatile Mk11 to his workhorse, the .300 Win Mag, the rifle he would use for most of his kills. He returned to Iraq for his second deployment in 2004, just as the insurgency was exploding. This time, he was sent to Fallujah. The city had become a fortress for insurgents, a place where American contractors had been brutally murdered and their bodies hung from a bridge. The Marines were preparing a massive assault to retake the city, and Chris and other SEAL snipers were brought in to support them. From a series of sniper hides in abandoned apartment buildings on the edge of the city, he began his work. The insurgents, thinking they were safe at a distance of 800 yards or more, would move into position to attack the Marines. They were wrong. Chris began taking them down, one by one. As the Marines pushed deeper into the city, the fighting became brutal, house-to-house combat. The insurgents weren't coming out into the open anymore. They were waiting inside, setting up ambushes. Chris watched as Marine after Marine was carried out, wounded or killed. He couldn't just sit on a rooftop and watch anymore. He made a decision that wasn't in his orders. He handed his sniper rifle to a young Marine, took an M16 in exchange, and went down on the street. He began leading a squad of Marines, teaching them the room-clearing techniques he had mastered as a SEAL. He was junior in rank to their sergeant, but they respected his experience and let him take the lead. He was the first man through the door, time and time again. In one house, he burst in to find a room full of Caucasians in desert camouflage, some with blonde hair. They were Chechens, foreign fighters recruited for the Holy War. A half-second's hesitation, he says, and he would have been dead. He mowed them down. The fighting was relentless. In one incident, an RPG hit the wall of a building he was in, and the wall collapsed on his legs, pinning him. He kicked the rubble off and kept firing. The injury would later require surgery on both knees, but he refused to go to a doctor. In a war zone, you don't get pulled out for something like that. You just keep going. It was in Fallujah that his reputation began to grow. He was racking up kills at an astonishing rate. But his most defining moment there came not from a sniper shot, but from an act of raw courage on the ground. A group of Marines was pinned down by intense fire. 2 reporters embedded with them were also trapped. Chris learned of their predicament and decided to act. He told the other Marines to lay down cover fire while he ran down the street, alone, into the hail of bullets. The insurgents focused their fire on him as he ran, his rifle tucked under his arm, firing back as he went. He reached the trapped men. "I'll cover you," he shouted. "Get the hell out of here." He stood up and laid down fire as they ran to safety. As the last one passed him, he glanced to his right and saw another Marine sprawled on the ground, shot in both legs. He ran over, grabbed the back of the man's body armor, and began dragging him back, all while still under fire. A grenade exploded nearby, peppering his side with shrapnel. His pistol, holstered on his leg, took the biggest fragment, saving him from a serious wound. He got the wounded Marine back to safety. For this action, he was put in for a Silver Star, but it was downgraded to a Bronze Star with valor. He smirks at the politics of medals. He didn't do it for the recognition. He did it because his brothers were in trouble. He came home from that deployment a different man. The war was taking its toll, not just on him, but on his marriage. Taya describes the difficulty of reconnecting. He would come home and shut himself in for a week, needing time to decompress. The man who came back was more explosive, his temper shorter. They were 2 people living in separate worlds, trying to find their way back to each other. The birth of their first son was a moment of immense joy, but it came just 10 days before he had to leave for his 3rd deployment. He admits that at the time, he hadn't truly bonded with his newborn son. His duty was calling him back to the war. This time, the destination was Ramadi, a city that, by 2006, was considered the most dangerous place in Iraq. Many of the insurgents who had fled Fallujah had regrouped there. His platoon, Charlie Platoon, nicknamed themselves the Punishers. They spray-painted the skull logo from the comic book character on their gear, their vehicles, and the walls of the city. It was psychological warfare. We're here. Fear us. The fighting in Ramadi was even more intense than Fallujah. They were in firefights almost every day. It was here that his legend was truly forged. The insurgents put a bounty on his head and gave him a nickname, Al-Shaitan Ramadi, the Devil of Ramadi. Chris was proud of it. It was a sign that he was effective, that he was hurting them. The op tempo was brutal. They would go out on missions for days at a time, with barely a break. It was on one of these missions that tragedy struck. They were on a rooftop, providing overwatch. Ryan Job, a new guy in the platoon who everyone called Biggles, was on the 60 machine gun. A shot rang out. Chris looked over and saw Ryan down. He'd been shot in the face. The bullet had ricocheted off his rifle and smashed into his head. Chris was sure he was dead. He carried his friend down the stairs, his heart breaking, convinced he was carrying a dead man. Ryan survived, miraculously, but he was permanently blinded. The loss was devastating. Chris blamed himself. He had positioned Ryan where he got hit. But there was no time to grieve. They got intel on the insurgents responsible and went after them, seeking payback. They were led into a trap. As they stacked up to enter a house, Mark Lee, another beloved member of the platoon, was at the front. He turned to shout a warning, and in that split second, a bullet passed through his open mouth, killing him instantly. In the space of a few hours, they had lost 2 men. One blinded, one killed. The sense of invincibility that surrounds a SEAL team was shattered. Chris described sitting back at their base, tears flowing down his face. It was the first time something in Iraq had truly broken him. He felt responsible. He was the experienced one. Why wasn't it him? The losses took a heavy toll. His blood pressure skyrocketed. He couldn't sleep. He was haunted by the faces of those he couldn't save. It was during this time that his wife Taya got the devastating news that their young daughter might have leukemia. The combination of the war, the loss of his friends, and the fear for his daughter pushed him to his breaking point. He was sent home early from that deployment. He came home a wreck, physically and emotionally. The years of combat had beaten up his body. He needed surgeries. But the deeper wounds were the ones you couldn't see. His marriage was at a crisis point. Taya felt he was choosing the teams over his family. It came to an ultimatum. If you re-enlist, she told him, I will know exactly where we stand. It was an impossible choice. Being a SEAL wasn't just his job, it was his identity. He loved the war, he loved his brothers, he felt it was his duty. But he also loved his family. In the end, he made the decision that so many warriors find the hardest. He chose to come home for good. But leaving the war behind didn't mean the war left him. He fell into a depression, drinking heavily. He felt like a quitter for leaving his boys. A car accident, which he walked away from without a scratch, served as a wake-up call. He began to find a new purpose. He started a company called Craft International, training military and law enforcement personnel. More importantly, he began working with wounded veterans. He would take them out to ranches, hunting and fishing, just giving them a chance to be around other guys who understood. He found that in helping them, he was also helping himself. He was finally becoming the husband and father he wanted to be. He was finding peace. But the story doesn't end there. In a tragic postscript not fully detailed in this edition of the book, Chris Kyle, the man who survived 4 combat tours and became a legend, was killed on a shooting range in Texas while trying to help a veteran who was reportedly suffering from PTSD. The protector, the sheepdog, was taken while trying to watch over one of his own. Commentary. When you close the final page of American Sniper, you're left with a profound sense of the complexities of war and the men who fight it. This isn't a simple story of heroism, though Chris Kyle was undeniably a hero. It's a raw, unflinching look at the anatomy of a warrior. What strikes me most is the brutal honesty of the book. Chris doesn't romanticize war. He describes it as savage, evil, and at times, fun. That last word is jarring, isn't it? But it's that honesty that makes this story so important. He gives us a window into a mindset that few of us can comprehend, the ability to compartmentalize, to see the world in black and white, to find a sense of purpose and even exhilaration in the midst of chaos and death. It's a mindset forged in the fires of Bud/S and honed on the rooftops of Fallujah and Ramadi. It's what allowed him to do his job, to protect his brothers. But the book also shows us the price of that mindset. The warrior who is so effective on the battlefield is often a stranger in his own home. The same hypervigilance that keeps him alive in Iraq makes it impossible to relax in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The emotional armor that protects him from the horrors of war also creates a wall between him and the people he loves most. Taya's voice in the book is so crucial because it reminds us that for every soldier on the front lines, there is a family fighting a different kind of battle at home. Her struggle, her loneliness, her anger, and her unwavering love provide the story's powerful emotional core. So what is the lesson here for a young person trying to find their way? I think there are a few. First, it's about purpose. Chris Kyle found his purpose in being a protector. It started when he was a boy, sticking up for other kids, and it culminated in him becoming a shield for his country. Finding that thing you are willing to dedicate your life to, that higher purpose beyond yourself, is one of the most powerful journeys a person can take. Whether it's as a soldier, a teacher, a parent, or an artist, that sense of mission gives life meaning. Second, it's a story about the true nature of strength. It's not just about physical toughness, though Chris had that in spades. Real strength is the mental fortitude to keep going when every fiber of your being wants to quit, like he did during Hell Week. It's the emotional courage to face your own demons when you come home, to admit you need help, and to fight for your family with the same ferocity you fought the enemy. And it's the moral courage to make impossible decisions under unimaginable pressure. Finally, Chris's life after the Navy is perhaps his most powerful lesson. He found a new mission, serving his fellow veterans. He understood that their wounds weren't just physical. He knew they needed camaraderie, a sense of purpose, and someone who understood what they'd been through. He showed us that your service doesn't have to end when you take off the uniform. We all have a responsibility to look after those who have protected us. So, how can you apply this? You don't have to be a Navy SEAL to be a protector. Look for the people in your life, in your community, who need someone to stand up for them. Find your flock and be their sheepdog, and when you meet veterans, don't just thank them for their service. Listen to their stories. Treat them not as victims, but as the heroes and valuable members of society they are. That's how we honor the legacy of men like Chris Kyle. The story of the American Sniper is a tragedy, but it is also a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It reminds us that our greatest battles are often not against an external enemy, but within ourselves, the struggle to find our purpose, to love and be loved, and to find our way home. That was a look into American Sniper by Chris Kyle. We've walked through the major moments of his life and career today, but a summary is like looking at a photograph of a mountain range. You can see the peaks and valleys, but you can't feel the wind, or the chill in the air, or the effort it took to climb to the top. The real power of this book is in the raw, unfiltered voice of Chris and the heartfelt perspective of his wife, Taya. It's in the small details, the jokes between firefights, the quiet moments of doubt, and the profound love that holds it all together. This summary is your map, but the treasure is found in reading the book itself. If you've been moved by this story of duty, sacrifice, and the search for peace, I encourage you to pick up a copy. The journey is one you won't forget. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you've found this journey valuable, please show your support by liking this summary and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another book that has shaped leaders and thinkers around the world. Let's keep exploring these powerful ideas together.